Recently, a US lawmaker made a shocking revelation. For years, funds intended to aid other nations had been covertly utilized to fund terrorist organizations. Now, this wasn't very shocking to those who understand how world politics operate. Let's be honest. When it serves their own interests, Western nations have a lengthy history of appending established order in other nations. And you know what? Burkina Faso appears to be following the similar pattern. A few weeks ago, there was a crazy rumor around the nation. With bundles of cash, a foreign agent was apprehended. We are discussing Central African francs worth billions. His task? Persuade the Burkinabe troops to rebel against Captain Ibrahim Traore, their leader. This was a test of allegiance, not only a bribe. It was an obvious message. Will you support your nation or give in to pressure? This is where things become even more intriguing. During a recent interview, the information that Traoré provided truly reveals the extent of this issue. A group of officers trained in France were immediately contacted and asked to take action when we stood up in 2022, he claimed. Their training did not prepare them to serve Africa. To safeguard French interests, they received training. And there are a lot of these officials in several African nations. The number of people who genuinely care about their country is unknown. Take a moment to process that. You see, this is a habit of France. Selected soldiers are sent back to France for training whenever it is involved in African nations. That seems like a fantastic opportunity on the surface. However, it's more like sowing seeds of control, as Traoré says. After returning home, the same troops turn into tools. They were the first people France contacted when Traoré began his rebellion in an attempt to put an end to it. However, things didn't work out as expected. Okay, visualize this. Something suspicious was happening in Burkina Faso only a few weeks ago. Furthermore, it was unrelated to charity or business. This is why it's important. A covert scheme involving a foreign man, an astounding 5 billion CFA francs, and some of the nation's own military personnel was discovered by Burkinabe officials. Yes, you've heard correctly. Millions of dollars and a scheme that might rock the nation. This foreign agent may have believed that he would find some easy targets, such as troops who were trained outside, possibly in France, and would be prepared to turn against their nation for a fair price. Let's just say that if that was the intention, things didn't exactly work out for him. What happened then? It all began when this foreigner arrived in the capital, Ouagadougou. He appeared to be just another businessman at first glance. Well-groomed, amiable, and most likely discussing partnerships and opportunities. The typical investment fare, you know. Here's the twist though. He had no intention of building anything. Not hospitals, not schools, not a coffee shop even. However, what he did bring was 5 billion CFA francs in a suitcase. But nobody was supposed to benefit from that money. It has nothing to do with jobs, water or roads. Not at all. It was intended to cause anarchy, to destroy everything from the inside out, to turn obedient troops into traitors, and to incite discontent that might bring the entire nation to its knees. What precisely was this man trying to accomplish? And who was he really? You must really enjoy this video if you are still viewing it. Why not press the like button for a moment? Have you taken that action? Let's move on. They were so certain that their plan would succeed that they didn't even attempt to conceal it. They sent a man into Burkina Faso with the sole task of persuading a few trusted soldiers to turn against Captain Traoré and assist in his downfall. Yes, the man arrived prepared, with a suitcase filled with 5 billion CFA francs. That's billions with a B. The idea was to buy loyalty. It was that simple. However, things didn't go as planned. The moment he began speaking to the soldiers, everything fell apart. You see, the soldiers he reached out to weren't just any soldiers. They were real patriots, ardent supporters of Traoré, and they weren't going to sell out their country, no matter how much money was on the table. However, they weren't going to just say no and walk away. These soldiers were smart, very smart. Instead of outright rejecting the man, they played along, remained composed, and pretended to be thinking about it. They did this because they needed to know more. They had a gut feeling that this man wasn't working alone, so they discreetly passed the information up the chain of command. Before long, Burkina Faso's national security team became involved, and together they began putting a plan in motion. Think spy movie stuff. These courageous soldiers maintained the act for weeks. The real action started on November 8, 2024, the day the final meeting was scheduled. The man, still believing he was pulling the strings, planned to meet with the soldiers again, this time ready to make it official. He would offer the full 5 billion CFA francs and seal the deal. But this money wasn't just a bribe. It was the fuel for something much bigger, a coup. One intended to push Traoré out of power, throw the country into chaos, and open the door for outsiders to step in and take control. Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Let's proceed. The Burkinabe leadership had been ahead of the game the entire time, and a full counter-operation had been planned. Just as the deal was about to fall through, Burkinabe security forces stormed the meeting spot, taking the man completely by surprise. His briefcase, filled with billions of dollars worth of cash, was seized on the spot. But this was just the beginning of a thorough investigation and a deep dive into the real forces behind this operation. Who sent him? Who else was involved? And most importantly, what was the bigger plan? Because this wasn't just about Burkina Faso. The more officials discovered, the more obvious it became that this was part of a much larger scheme. One that aimed to destabilize not just Traoré's leadership, but the entire Sahel region. Someone somewhere had seen Burkina Faso's internal challenges as an opportunity, and they were attempting to take advantage of them. As soon as the news of the failed coup attempt spread, the entire country took notice. Burkina Faso was sending a clear message. No amount of money or outside intervention could destroy the nation's unity. President Traoré wasted no time in addressing the populace, praising the soldiers who had risked everything to defend their country. This wasn't just about apprehending one man. Rather, it was about demonstrating that Burkina Faso would not submit to corruption, foreign influence, or any other covert agenda that attempted to undermine its foundation. Rather than the military turning against Traoré as the plotters had hoped, support for Traoré grew, and his troops, now more united than ever, stood firmly behind him. He was a pawn, a messenger, someone sent by powerful interests who had everything to gain from Burkina Faso falling into chaos. Burkina Faso may not be the richest country in Africa in terms of money, but when it comes to natural resources, it literally sits on a gold mine. Vast reserves of gold, manganese, and phosphate lie beneath its soil. And history has shown that when an African nation begins to take control of its own resources, foreign powers lurking in the background aren't exactly happy about it. Burkina Faso's location in the Sahel and recent political changes have made it a prime target for external players looking to manipulate events to their advantage. However, this recent coup attempt wasn't just about stirring up a little unrest. It was a part of something much larger. Based on intelligence gathered by the Burkinabe military, the captured suspect had direct ties to foreign operatives stationed in neighboring countries. These operatives weren't acting alone. Rather, they were working for powerful forces, entities with deep pockets, and a vested interest in keeping Burkina Faso from standing on its own 2 feet. This is where things get even more sinister. The real plan was much bigger than simply bribing a few soldiers. It was about destroying Burkina Faso's independence and ensuring that the country remained under foreign influence. If Burkina Faso collapsed, it would send shockwaves throughout West Africa, making it easier for these outside players to step in and tighten their hold on the region's wealth. Burkina Faso has begun to rebel against foreign control under President Ibrahim Traoré. Despite security challenges, Traoré has made it clear that Burkina Faso's resources belong to its people, not foreign corporations or hidden power brokers. In a short period of time, he has already started renegotiating contracts with international companies, regaining control of the country's gold industry, and putting national interests first, something that hasn't gone unnoticed by those who have profited from the old system for years. To them, a stable and independent Burkina Faso is bad for business. This entire plot to throw the country into chaos was never about democracy, human rights, or any of the typical justifications used by foreign powers. Rather, it was about keeping Burkina Faso weak enough to be controlled, ensuring that profits and influence stayed in the hands of those who have always pulled the strings. However, thanks to the unwavering loyalty of the Burkinabe military, the plot was uncovered before it could cause any significant harm. Now, if you consider everything that has happened to Traoré since he came to power, you can see that this is by no means the first attempt to remove him from office. He has survived over 9 assassination attempts and coup plots since he took office. 9. And that begs the very serious question: how long before another attempt is made? It's no secret that Traoré has been one of the most heavily targeted African leaders of our time. However, the most agonizing part is that many of these attempts have not only been planned by foreigners. Some have been carried out by Burkina Faso itself, with assistance and abetted by those outside the country because they perceive Traoré's leadership as a threat to their interests. Since Ibrahim Traoré took office in September 2022, he has survived 10 assassination attempts in less than 2 years, which is more than any other African leader in such a short period of time. The first attempt occurred just 2 months after he replaced former military chief Paul-Henri Damiba. And here's the twist: Damiba himself was responsible for the most recent one, number 10. Yes, the same man Traoré removed returned, but this time with a deadly plan rather than words. At the time of the first attempt, Traoré didn't retaliate with force. Instead, he warned them about people offering bribes to remove him from power, and urged them not to fall for it. For a while, that strategy seemed to calm things down. However, until September 2023, when the second attempt occurred. This time, Traoré took no chances. He launched an official investigation, and it didn't take long to find the culprits. 3 soldiers were arrested and charged with everything from disobeying orders to plotting against the state. After that, the attacks started coming in rapid fire. Later that same September, another attempt was made, and from that moment until this year, there have been a total of 8 different plots to either terminate or overthrow Traoré. But what makes the 10th attempt stand out is how dark and dangerous it was. This wasn't just another plan to take out the president. It turned into a nightmare for the country. Unlike the earlier attacks, this one led to the deaths of hundreds of people, both soldiers and civilians. It wasn't just personal anymore, it was national. Reports say the brains behind this operation weren't just locals. It involved Burkinabe citizens living in other countries, like Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Nigeria, who were working behind the scenes. But they weren't acting alone. According to the country's security minister, the people involved included civilians, current and former military officers, and were supported by a mix of powerful players. The web of betrayal runs deep. Some of the most prominent people in Burkina Faso, including former ministers, journalists, and even a former member of parliament, were involved in the latest plot to overthrow President Ibrahim Traoré. However, the biggest shocker was the involvement of Paul-Henri Damiba, the man Traoré removed from power in September 2022. At first, Damiba seemed to accept his fate and stepped down without a fight, giving the impression that he was ready to move on. But behind the scenes, it seems he never let go of the grudge, working in the shadows and ally with local conspirators and foreign backers to overthrow Traoré's government. Those who were arrested disclosed something terrifying during interrogations. Many of the recent insurgent attacks that have terminated hundreds of civilians and soldiers were not random acts of terror. Rather, they were planned by these plotters, who reached out to insurgent groups and struck deals to launch violent assaults across the country with the intention of causing chaos, undermining the government, and making Traoré appear incapable of leading. However, Burkina Faso's security forces were not caught off guard, and they acted swiftly, tracking down the conspirators and apprehending a number of key players before the plot could fully unfold. This may have prevented even more destruction, but it begs the question: why does this keep happening? What is it about Traoré that makes him such a constant target? Now, if you look at all of these attacks from a distance, you'll see that they were all planned by Burkina Faso citizens. Every coup attempt, assassination plot, and attempt to overthrow the government has been led by local actors. But why are there factions that are determined to overthrow him? Because when it comes to African politics, there's always more than just local interests at play. External forces are always present, quietly pulling strings in the background. Africa is rich, full of gold, oil, diamonds, rare minerals, and land. And for a very long time, powerful nations like the US and France have had their sights set on those riches. The problem is that they don't typically try to obtain them by simply trading fairly. No, that would mean paying full price and respecting local control. Instead, these countries often attempt to control the people in power. You see, when an African government leans toward the West, deals are easily signed, giving the country access to valuable resources for almost nothing in exchange for promises of development, a few grants, and a lot of handshakes at international summits. However, behind all the smiles and photo ops, the real goal is simple: make it easier for them to take what they want. This is a strategy that has worked time and time again. In the past, even when African countries began to wake up and demand better, many of their leaders remained friendly with the West, smiling for the cameras, signing unfair contracts, and turning a blind eye as wealth flowed out of their countries and into foreign bank accounts, leaving them free to do as they pleased. They had no choice but to keep elections looking somewhat clean, so the West could continue to pretend democracy was alive and well. If you look around today, you'll still see it. For example, Equatorial Guinea has had the same president for more than 30 years. And despite ruling over some of Africa's poorest citizens, this man has lived like royalty. But don't expect Western governments to say anything about it, because those leaders play nice, support Western interests, and are treated like friends rather than dictators. What happens when an African leader refuses to bow down? That's when things get dangerous. History demonstrates that when a leader stands up to the West and says, "Our country first," terms like dictator, strongman, or authoritarian begin to appear in the headlines. And shortly after that, something bad usually happens, sometimes even death. Just consider the cases of Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, and Muammar Gaddafi, all leaders who wanted Africa to take charge of its own destiny, who all died violently and were portrayed as villains by Western-backed media before they were removed, usually by citizens of their own countries, to make it appear as though the country had turned against them. This is exactly what is happening with President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. Since he took office, he has made it clear that he was not going to follow orders. He was pro-Burkina Faso, and every decision he has made has been about putting his country first, whether it be in mining, politics, or military alliances. As a result, he has been under constant pressure, with sanctions, negative press, and repeated coup attempts. The Western media frequently portrays him as a dangerous man who uses anti-French rhetoric to maintain his power. But the true purpose of these headlines is to incite the Burkina Faso people against him, to make them think that he is the issue rather than the system he is fighting for. This is the same tactic they used in Libya prior to the overthrow of Gaddafi. But Traoré has so far escaped all of the challenges he has faced. And if the most recent coup attempt has taught us anything, it is that his military supports him and his people still believe in his vision. Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.